Hi everyone, and welcome to the Target Jobs Solicitor Series Part 2. The first half of this webinar will be a panel discussion based on assessment centres, interviews for vacation schemes and training contracts. The latter part of the webinar is open to student Q&As about any part of the application process. Please do ask our panellists questions. There is a questions tab on the right hand side. We'll be doing an upvote system, so if you see a question that you like, just give it an upvote. So on that note, I'm going to pass over to our host, Maya.
All right, great stuff. Thank you very much, Phoebe. So, as Phoebe said, in this webinar, we'll be talking to representatives from RPC and Royds, Withy King to talk about tips and tricks for a successful application to training contracts and vacation schemes. As Phoebe said, there will be an opportunity to do a Q&A session at the end, and we'll open this to a more broader discussion of everything to do with training contracts, what actually happens on vacation schemes, and then just application advice from kind of the get-go, the first initial written application stage. So obviously, some of you will have joined us for part 1. So welcome back, and welcome to those who are just joining us for this session. For those that haven't met me, my name is Maya, and I'm currently an events and student engagement assistant at Target Jobs, but I'm also a future trainee solicitor at a city law firm, and I recently graduated with a degree in law from the University of Sheffield. So today we are joined by some lovely panelists. First up, we have Jade, who is the Graduate Recruitment Advisor at Withy King. And we are also joined by 2 representatives from RPC. So first we have Nicola, who is a Senior Early Talent Executive. And we have Ali, who's a first seat trainee solicitor. So starting with Nicola, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your role is, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually joined RPC relatively recently, just before Christmas. So I've been with the firm just under 3 months, and I'm the Senior Early Talent Executive, which means that I look after all things recruitment, selection and development related for our trainees and apprentices across our London and Bristol offices.
All right, great. Nicola, I think your microphone is slightly quiet. I don't know if it's to do with the positioning of it. I don't know if you can sort of move it around. While you're
I've moved it closer. Can you hear me better?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Sorry, you can actually probably see our faces a bit better as well.
It might just be because there's 2 of you on the microphone as well. But Jade, can we switch over to you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I'm graduate recruitment for Royds, Withy King. I joined back in October. So I go right from application stage through to assessment centre, on our vacation schemes, and similar to Nicola, look after the apprenticeship recruitment as well.
All right, perfect. And then moving to our trainee solicitor, Ali, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience of your training contracts so far?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a first year trainee in the professional financial risks team here at RPC, and I started in September, and it's been a really good start so far. It's mostly a litigation seat with a bit of insurance coverage, and I've engaged in a variety of tasks. Everyone's really friendly. It's been really good, and it's been really enjoyable so far.
All right, great. So we've got to know you a little bit. Now let's kick off with the more formal questions. So starting with Jade then, can you tell us what students can expect of the application process to your vacation schemes and training contracts?
Yeah, so luckily I can cover them both at the same time because they're both a very similar process. So if we're just talking about the application form and not the video interview and the rest of it, then you'll need to attach your CV alongside of it. But the main bulk of it is about 4 or 5 questions that you're asked. You'll also fill in your employment history, the grades that you got, that kind of stuff. But the main bit that we're looking for is how you answer these 4 or 5 questions. I won't give you the example model answers for all of them, but it's just thinking about why you'd want to work from us, why you want that training contract, or why you want the vacation scheme, what you think you can bring, and then obviously getting to know about yourself as well, so your skills, your hobbies, and the type of things you like doing outside of work as well.
Okay, great. And can you tell us a little bit more about your assessment centre process if you choose to have one?
Yeah, of course. So in between the application and the assessment centre, we have a video interview. And again, that's about 4 or 5 questions. That seems to be the best amount to give us enough, but without making it too laborious for yourself. They're just 30 seconds. And from that, we decide who comes on the vacation scheme. And then if you're talking about the assessment centres, who would then come on the assessment centre. On the assessment centre itself, there's sort of 3 or 4 things that we'll get you to do. And then throughout the day, there'll be a chance for you to network and get to know people from the firm as well. But there's a group exercise that follows on to a presentation. There's a mini interview that will be probably with myself or someone else from HR alongside a partner. So those are sort of the main things. And then there's a written exercise that you'll do as well. We call it a written exercise, but it's on laptops. And then whoever is successful from the assessment centre, you've got one final stage left, which is the final interview that's about an hour's long. And that'll be with our training principal, a partner, and again, probably myself.
All right, good. And how does that compare with our PC?
So in terms of our application process, the first initial stage is the application form. It sounds quite similar to Jade's application process, and essentially asking you to input your academics, your current stage of study, and any sort of work experience, volunteering, extracurricular activities that you've undertaken thus far. And then there's 3 motivational questions, which is really trying to get a feel for you, your personality, why RPC has resonated with you in particular, what differentiates it from other firms, and then trying to gain a level, an understanding of your level of knowledge surrounding commercial law and current affairs generally as well. And so are the 3 questions that we focus on the application form. Would you like me to talk through our assessment days as well? Or?
Yeah, if you could start with the line of it, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So after the application form, if you've been shortlisted, you'll be asked to complete a Watson Glaser critical thinking assessment. Then following that, if you're shortlisted past that stage, then you'll be invited to an assessment day. And on the assessment day, there's 3 core activities that you'll undertake, one being a written exercise, one being an interview, and the other being a meeting, which is a follow through from the written exercise to talk about potentially what you've just written.
All right, thank you very much for outlining that. Ali, you can give us a slightly different perspective on this. So how did you find going through the application process, and specifically, how did you find the assessment centre part of the process?
I think the application process is always, well, it varies from firm to firm, obviously. I would say there was a lot of emphasis on, one, showing your competency skills and conveying that through all the applications, and then linking your experience with the firms in a way, in your commercial awareness. So those, I think, were the 2 main threads that pulled all the applications together. I think with RPC, there was quite an emphasis on displaying your creative side, I would say, and then also just trying to show that your values are in line with the firm. I think the application process was geared towards that, because they want to know your personality. They want to know that you're someone with ambition who's going in the same direction as the firm, if that makes sense. So that's how I think RPC's application was unique. So yeah, I remember one of my questions was geared, towards around just a particular sector that you think is going to grow, for example, in the future. And so those similar sorts of questions relate to commercial awareness and the firm's ethos and values as well. And then when it came to the assessment centre, again, I felt the interview was kind of like a conversation. And then the tasks again are geared towards showing your creativity, showing I don't know how to describe it really, just how your own personality, if that makes sense, is geared towards showing that to the people who are taking the assessment centre.
Yeah, great. I think we'll talk about interviews a bit more later, but I want to have a chat about commercial awareness because it's kind of the buzzword that comes up time and time again. But as graduate recruiters, what level of commercial awareness are you really looking for in potential vacation scheme and training contract students? Is it the case that you need to fully understand the workings of an M&A transaction? Do you need to understand balance sheets? Is it more about reading news stories? What is it that you're looking for, Jade?
Yeah, so I think we're always conscious that we need to keep the process fair, and obviously not everyone would have come from a background where they've already studied law. So I think commercial awareness can stem from both sides, because I've already seen a couple of questions pop in around if you haven't done a law degree, and actually you're not at a disadvantage from that perspective. I would say there's so many different elements to commercial awareness, but some of the ones that are probably the most important in our process is understanding the legal sector and where we're heading. So for example, we're going through a merger in May, so thinking about what some of the implications might be in and around that, and how that's going to affect other firms and how that will affect us as employees and our clients. And then there's thinking about commercial awareness in terms of the news and what's going on at the moment and how that will impact not just COVID. And then a couple of years ago, I can remember saying not just Brexit, but like a couple of things that might be a little bit more personal, it might be a little bit more regional, but that are going to impact us and our clients. And thinking about it a little bit further, so we know what the impacts are and we know whether they're positive and negative, but what can we do about it and where can we go? How do we take it that next step further? And how is it going to impact their own career as well? The more they know what sector they want to go into, the more they can be niche with that. But I think at this stage, it's absolutely fine to talk more generally about it as well.
Yeah. And would you say the same, Nicola, or do you look for a slightly different level of commercial awareness, or even a different type of commercial awareness?
I would absolutely echo what Jade has said. I think you have to be really mindful of the stage that people are at. I mean, we recruit people, some of whom have studied law, some people haven't, some people have been in the business world, they've maybe career changes, and then some people are just penultimate year law students, so they're a little bit earlier potentially in terms of their thinking about law and developing their skill set. So I think your application process and the selection criteria that you use has to be representative of everyone's different backgrounds, and so I think it would be unfair to expect someone coming in for a summer scheme or an assessment or a training contract assessment day to expect them to have a really sort of intricate knowledge about the goings on of maybe a commercial deal or some, with RPC specifically something insurance focused. I think that would be quite unfair. I think ultimately on the LPC and their training contract, we will teach them everything that they need to know in terms of a legal perspective. And so, as Jay said, it's more sort of having an awareness and an understanding of an interest in current and business affairs, and always be mindful of how what you're reading on an international level can impact upon the legal sector, different firms and their clients, and what impact that might have. I think the thing with commercial awareness is that it's a little and often you can't just read, for example, a news article overnight and think, right, commercially aware now. It's definitely about building it up over time, and there are really good resources available out there for people wanting to do that, such as Minimize app and maybe kind of bite-sized descriptions to The Economist, FT. There's lots of different ways depending upon your particular interest areas.
And how did you become commercially aware? What steps did you take to prepare for your interviews and assessment centres? And has that kind of helped you prepare as you've started your training contract as well?
Yeah, so for general commercial awareness, it was literally just reading the Financial Times and The Economist a little bit every day. And the more you read it every day, the more you just get used to those kinds of stories, and you get used to the vernacular and the vocabulary that they're using. It just seeps into you by like osmosis, kind of. You just get used to it. For when it comes to more specific firm commercial awareness, probably just go on firms' websites, look at particular partners and projects they're involved in, and that would help me zone into like how they're expanding their strategy, what partners are involved in what projects, and so that's the tactic that I use. And yeah, just reading for general commercial awareness, just read the news a little bit every day, especially the Financial Times and the Economist, because they're really good. Yeah, your general commercial awareness just expands considerably.
And there's probably, for those that are still at university and undergraduates, there are probably for their students' union, commercial awareness societies. They may not be called commercial awareness societies, but they may be business societies, or I think there's investment societies, and I think there's lots of different ways, depending, as I said, where your interests lie, that you're able to build up that knowledge and familiarity.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely from my own experience that it is what you said, Nicola, about little and often. Like, it's not like revising for an exam, because I suspect that will probably come across like you've revised for an exam. It's not showing that genuine enthusiasm that you build by sort of following a news story over time, for instance. But yeah, 3 really great insights. Thank you very much. Moving on then. Could you give us an insight into what the biggest stumbling blocks are for aspiring solicitors when they take part in assessment centres? Who would like to take this question first?
I'm happy.
I'm sure
that we can all build on what we say. Can I just checking that you can hear me okay?
It's off and on. I can hear you. If you could get slightly closer to the microphone, that might be just a little bit better.
I don't want to give you too much of a close-up of my face. I do apologise.
No, that's great. I can hear you well.
You'll be able to hear me. Okay. In terms of stumbling blocks for assessment days, I think sometimes people can be their own worst enemies in terms of nerves. And I think that the more assessment days you do, the more familiarity and the more your confidence you're going to have, because you're going to be able to pre-prepare that little bit better, because you're going to be able to pre-anticipate the questions that are going to be coming your way, because whilst might be interviewing at many different firms, they're all going to be, to a certain point, asking you similar questions to a certain point, and so the more practice that you have, the more you'll be able to prepare. I think always make sure that time management is at the key top of your mind, because whether it's an interview and they've asked you a question and you're not entirely sure and you just want to have a moment to take a pause and think, really take that time. It's not going to go against you. I would strongly advise you to just maybe take a sip of water, take a step back and think about why they're asking you that question, and hence your response and how you're going to tailor it. And I imagine that would, for the majority of people, translate into a more sort of succinct answer. And then time management, again, in terms of written exercises, I think if you plot out a time frame at the beginning of a written exercise, for example, making sure that you've got, for example, 10 minutes to read the information and start writing notes and actually write, and always give yourself extra kind of 2-3 minutes at the end to allow for proof checking and making sure that the attention to detail is there.
Yeah. And just before Jade answers, Ali, can I ask you which element of the assessment centre you found the most difficult, and also then how you overcame this?
The hardest part for me, I thought, was the written assessments, and this is just general assessment days I've been on in general, because you are under time pressure to come up with an answer really quickly. And I would say my answer to that would be just to try and relax when you do it, and have a plan going in on how you'll approach it. Sometimes the nerves can overcome you in a way. So yeah, I'd say the written exercise is probably the most difficult part, whereas I enjoy the interviews and the presenting.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Ali. So Jade, hopping over to you with a question about what are the biggest stumbling blocks that you see for aspiring solicitors in the assessment centre stage?
Yeah, I would say by the time you've got to assessment centre stage, it's probably worth pointing out that we already want you to do really well. We've already seen you at application stage, video. You're being brought in for a reason, which should give a little bit of confidence, hopefully, when you join. But in terms of stumbling blocks, I definitely see it where candidates try and say what they think we want to hear rather than their genuine answer. And actually, when you think about it, ultimately, we're working out who we want to work with, whose career we want to progress. We need to know genuinely how you think and feel on these things. And also, sometimes the predictions can be wrong. So maybe your natural answer would have actually been stronger than what you think we're looking for all of the time, because we're not looking for the finished article. You've got about 2 years before you join for your training contract. Then you've got your 2-year training contract. We're looking at who you're going to be at NQ level. So it's always worth bearing that in mind. And I think ultimately it's about where you want to end up. So the more you're yourself through that process, the more we can work it out, but also the more you can work out whether that's somewhere that you think you're going to be really happy. On our assessment centres, we've got the group exercise as well, which I think adds another sense of anxiety and dynamic to the day for you guys. So it's just one stumbling block. To come back to the actual question that I've noticed is people do try and outperform others sometimes, or think that I think when you're in a group exercise, it can be really easy to try and self-assess yourselves against others. And it's really important where possible to try not to do that, which is really easy for me sat here not having to do it. But it's really important because you won't always know what we're looking for. And we don't always hire the one that said the most or anything like that. So as long as you're contributing and you're saying what you think is worthwhile and you're focusing and you're staying on task, you're probably doing all the right things that you should be doing. So it's just about having that confidence. And if there's things throughout the day that you're not sure about, please make sure that you're asking them, because that's the best way to make sure that you don't trip up and do things like that.
All right, perfect. And are there any final comments that either Nicola or Ali want to add to that before we move on to the next question?
For me,
No, I think Jade covered all the points, I think.
No? All good. So in that case, we'll move on to talk a bit about interviews, because you both have interviews as part of your vacation scheme and training contract application process. So then for you, Nicola, what says to you during the interview that this candidate has a genuine enthusiasm for your firm and maybe also the area of law as well? How can you tell that person is dedicated to your firm?
I think a lot of it stems back to the research that person has done and the level of knowledge that they have on the firm. I think if somebody comes in with a genuine interest and they've able to demonstrate they know the firm's core practice areas, they haven't and articulate why that has a particular interest for them and make that personal and say what particularly resonated and give specific examples in terms of the research they've done. Maybe it's a particular matter that they've seen that the firm has been involved with. Maybe it's a particular issue. Maybe it's something a little bit more personal to them. Maybe it could be sort of a mentor scheme. It's just about differentiating the firm from others and for them to be able to explain why that firm has really stood out amongst other firms, what differentiates it.
Okay, that's great. And then moving on to Jade. Also, sorry, Nicola, can I just ask you to mute your microphone while you're not talking, just to prevent some feedback that's coming through?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Can you hear me okay? It just went a bit crackly my side. Brilliant. It did cut out a little bit my side, so would you mind repeating the question? Sorry.
Yeah, so this is about how candidates can show genuine enthusiasm in an interview. To like, how can they make sure they don't sound kind of robotic and rehearsed and forced? What shows to you that they have commitment to your firm and your areas of law?
Brilliant. Yeah. So I would say the more they give natural answers, the better. So I guess not rehearsing and practicing them a lot will help them come across less rehearsed. But I think also what their reasons are for wanting to join us. So there's lots of information on pretty much all the firms' websites, and there's information on ours as well. But I guess it's going that one stage further, so that the strongest applicants will probably have either looked at who the interviewers were, if they know that in advance, and had a little look at their LinkedIn, or they might have looked at some of our matters or some of our cases that have been advertised recently and worked out why they're of interest to them. If they are, had a look at the firm's direction in terms of where it's heading, and sort of focused on quite a few different areas. If they don't know what practice area they want to go into, that's still absolutely fine, because they can have a broad understanding of the firm and where it's going, and still be impressed with some of the things that firm's achieved without it needing to be attributed to a specific area. So I'd say whatever area, whatever stage they're at, they can still show a genuine interest.
So clearly in that case, preparation is really key to success at this stage. Ali, can I ask you what you did to prepare for your assessment centres? And is there anything that, looking back, you would have changed or did differently?
So what I think I'm just going to really echo what Nicola and Jade said as well, is that I was quite specific in my research. The first thing I do is I look at the areas of the firm that they're quite highly ranked in, or that they're known for, and then I would look at specific partners and projects that they worked on that interested me and make a note of them, and then I look at firm interviews of people at the firm, so you can kind of gauge what their strategy is going forward, and so you can get their ethos as well. And so I was really looking quite specifically at particular people, projects, and practice areas. And then I wouldn't say you need to rehearse, word for word, or prepare a script at all, but just keep in mind what draws you to the firm, and then try and convey that, as Jade said, in a natural way. So I wouldn't prepare like it's an exam, but just do thorough research. So I wouldn't really change my approach. Obviously, it changed as I became more experienced. And then, so I would just say try and be as specific as you can.
All right, thank you very much. Do either Nicola or Jade want to make any more comments about how students can prepare? Often we get questions from students being like, oh, how can I stand out in these assessment centres, particularly if they continue to be virtual? Have you got any comments to make about that at all?
The only thing I will say is that we're planning, fingers crossed, on running ours in person this year as well. So we won't be running ours virtually. Is that the same for you, Nicola?
We have just finished our assessment days actually, and they were all virtual, but we are very much hoping that our summer scheme will be the first that we've held for 3 years in person in June and July this year.
That would be amazing. Well, hopefully it will happen and you can all have a nice time meeting in person and getting involved in the team as well. So I think the final question is going to be about skills and qualities that you look for. I'm conscious that I want to open it up to the Q&A session. So Jade, could you summarize in a few words what are the key skills and qualities that you are looking for in any aspiring trainee solicitor?
Yeah, I think this first bit kind of avoids the question, but I will answer it. I would say what you will notice as you meet our trainees is that they are all very different. So we're not looking for like a carbon copy of exactly the same person. There's no one type cultural background that fits in. It is a very broad range at RWK. And it is the same across all of our offices as well. Having said that, to make a good lawyer, there are some certain key skills and attributes that will help you. We've obviously got our values as well, so trying to align with them. But in terms of skills, I would say someone that is quite methodical and thinks things through. So it goes back to what Nicola was saying about taking that little sip of water before you answer these questions. It just means that your answer is more well-rounded and comprehensive as you go through. Someone that's a bit of a team player, so majority of the work a lawyer does will be independent and will then be checked off by somebody else or something like that, but someone that really does know how to work with other members of the team, knows when to help someone else out and pick other bits up, but also knows when to delegate back out if it gets too much. Those are all things we also teach you, but they're things that show us throughout the process that you've got those key skills to make a good lawyer as well.
Okay. Ali, it'd be quite interesting to hear from you then about how will you successfully show you have these skills in the assessment centre? But then perhaps more interestingly, how have you developed these skills since starting your training contract?
So during the assessment centre, there was one sort of presentation we had to make, and I took a risk during it. I think it was like a business presentation related thing. I took a risk in a way that I don't think some other candidates might have done before, or were doing, because so I tried to show my approach the problem in a creative way, and I just said to myself, well, you've got nothing to lose here, really. Just try and approach this issue or solution or question from a different angle. And so I think I was able to convey in my feedback. They said that I was able to convey a creative approach. So that's the way I did it during the assessment centre. Yeah, I would say just look at each firm's values and just see if they align with yours, and then go forward from there. I don't think it's something that you can really work on that much in terms of changing your own values. So it's best to find a firm that aligns with yours. If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. Nicola, could you highlight some of RPC's values in that case?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, collaboration is very, very important. For RPC, we work very, very closely together. Trainees work very, very closely together with their supervisors as well. And because RPC has a relatively small intake, we take, for example, 14 in London, about 4 in Bristol, and the trainees really get to know each other. They're quite a tight-knit cohort. They get along very well personally as well as professionally, and that's a big part of the firm as well, is working alongside people who you also want to who you also get along with personally as well. So that's a big factor for RPC.
Okay, thank you. That's a great answer. Going back to you, Ali, I'm sorry, I feel like we're using you a lot here, but what would you say to anyone that's considering a career as a solicitor that has perhaps been through the application cycle a few times at this point? They're starting to kind of lose faith. What would you say to someone in that position?
I would say, well, you probably have to rethink your approach to the applications. One, I'd say reach out to people who understand the process and get feedback from them. And then you would have to just change the way you approach it generally. I would say try something different. Maybe emphasize something else in the application process. I mean, it's difficult to say. It is obviously some people vary their applications on an individual basis. But I would say the main thing would be to reach out to people who are familiar with the whole process and ask for feedback.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is great. It's something that I used when I was going through my application process as well, because it was just really useful. Because I mean, I had no legal contacts at all. I didn't even fully understand what a trainee solicitor did. So it is really, really useful to reach out to as many people as possible. And I believe that both Nicola and Jade are fine with being contacted after this. I don't know if Ali, you are too, but yes, make the most of any resources that you can kind of get your hands on, really. Either Jade or Nicola, do you have any kind of final comments, tips, hints for anyone who's coming up to an assessment centre or will be, in the next year or so?
No, I would just say to just try your best with it all, keep going, and I think it comes back to that, trying not to self-assess yourself while you're on the assessment days, whether they are virtual or in person, just giving everything your all, and thinking about that kind of stuff after.
And try not to be disheartened. You will likely get knockbacks unless you're in the very, very lucky select few who maybe in their first application are successful and go on to get offered an accepted training contract. They're very much the small minority. That's not the case for, I'd suggest, the vast majority of people. And it does require tenacity and it does require resilience to be a trainee, and so it's important important that you're able to show that kind of going through the recruitment process as well. And just make sure that you take feedback and be open to feedback in all of its forms, whether it's from an assessment day, if it's from an application form, just really kind of learn from the experience. And ultimately, if it's not unfortunately the outcome that maybe you would have liked, then learn something from it, and maybe later down the line it all worked out for the best, and actually it just, you know, you took your own route there, and yeah, just keep plugging away at it essentially.
Okay, great. That, I think, is a really nice positive message to finish the formal panel questions on. So we will open the floor up now to student Q&As. So feel free to drop any messages in the box at the bottom. We can open this to talking about what actually happens on vacation schemes, what training contracts are like, or any part of the application process before that. We've already had quite a few questions come in, so I'll have a look from the bottom and see what people have to say. So there's a couple of questions already about what experience is required. So someone has asked, how probable is it to get a vacation scheme or training contract if you don't have a lot of work experience? And someone else asked, what kind of experience is expected to apply? Jade, would you like to start this question?
Yeah, so I would say that there probably is things that you have done that will count as work experience. It might be a part-time job, it might be some non-legal work experience, but it's just making the most of that and thinking what the transferable skills are and following through with that. If you haven't got any legal work experience, there's still ways you can demonstrate the interest, so that'll come through in your commercial awareness. But it also might be about someone you've had a conversation with, or a society that you're part of, or something from your degree if you're doing a law degree. I think you can still demonstrate it by thinking about why you've got that commitment to law and why you want to do it in the first place, and then that should hopefully help you find what relevant work experience you've already got and how you can translate that across.
Yeah. Nicola or Ali, have you got anything else to say about that, or we can move on to the next question?
I agree with Jade. I think that most firms are very mindful of the importance they place upon legal work experience. I think particularly in terms of vacation schemes, because it gets into that catch-22 of you need experience to get experience. And I think you have to be mindful that people come from all different types of backgrounds, and it might be actually somewhat easier for certain people from certain backgrounds to be able to secure legal work experience. And so don't be discouraged if you don't have legal work experience. A lot of firms are offering virtual work experience on their websites. For example, we have a virtual work experience platform, one geared more towards university students and another that's geared more towards school students. And you're really able to get a feel for not just commercial law, but specifically commercial law at RPC, with reflection in terms of our core practice areas, and what the types of tasks you might be able to, you would be getting up to as a trainee at RPC. So that's really, really useful. So kind of do your research. You don't need to physically be in a law firm shadowing someone to get that legal experience by any means. And I think ultimately, if you've been someone that's, for example, working whilst studying, or someone that has, you know, taken on positions of responsibility through extracurricular, and the skills that you're going to have developed from that experience actually are going to be a lot more useful than potentially just sat there shadowing someone for 2 days 3 years ago that actually isn't going to be that helpful. So yeah, I'd say really kind of reflect and really kind of use all of your resources that are open to you to put yourself in the best environment to sort of increase your knowledge around commercial law and the firms that you're interested in.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that, Nicola. I mean, I certainly didn't have much in the way of legal work experience when I was applying. And I'd be curious, Ali, to know what non-legal work experience you spoke about either in your applications or in your assessment centre.
Yeah, I spoke about doing sports at university, being involved in societies and things of that nature. I think people at the law firms are well aware that not everyone can have legal work experience, and so you should leverage everything you've already done in the past, because it is useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then following on from that, there's a few questions here about what to do if you don't study law currently. I mean, I would not say that anyone is at a disadvantage for not studying law, but could you give any words of encouragement or advice for those that don't currently study a law degree? Maybe starting with Nicola.
You're not going to be disadvantaged in any way if you haven't studied law. I think generally about 50% of our trainees did, 50% of them didn't, and so you're not at a disadvantage. The majority of universities, whether you're a law student, even though it's called a law society, the majority will let you join regardless of whether you're a law student, and so I would say focus on the skills that you've acquired through your degree that actually maybe you wouldn't have got as much exposure to if you had studied law. For example, if you're a non-law student, I think a lot of people who apply tend to be kind of the sort of essay writing, kind of humanities analytical degrees subjects. So for example, history, philosophy, history of art, sort of analysing information and writing essays, but actually we're really keen to hear from those people, but also people from STEM backgrounds, so your maths, science, because it's all different skill sets, and we're keen to attract people from a diverse array of interests and backgrounds, and so absolutely then don't feel kind of discouraged if, for example, you don't think that your degree subject relates as closely to law as potentially others do.
And Jade, would you say the same?
Yeah, I would completely agree with all of that. And I think that's the same for our numbers as well. It's about 50-50. And where I've worked before, it's been around 50-50 as well. So they're not at a disadvantage at all. I think it can feel like it because you don't have the legal knowledge. But in terms of what we're looking for and what we're assessing, it is all things that are open to everyone. So all the events that we would run or attend would be open to, it might be for a specific uni, but would be open to like law and non-law students. Obviously, our website's there for everyone and the news is there for everyone as well. So in terms of what we're actually assessing and looking for, they should have the same opportunities, which is good.
So Caitlin's got a good question here. Caitlin asks, how do you think a candidate can strike the balance between giving a structured and concise answer and a natural answer which represents personality in an interview? I don't mind who takes this first. You can fight amongst yourselves.
I say there's no sort of one right or wrong prescriptive way of answering interview questions. I think what works for one person may not necessarily work as well for someone else. There are a lot of resources out there to use, and university careers services tend to be quite useful as well in terms of maybe doing kind of mock interviews, mock assessment days, or just someone sort of that maybe you're close to that is practicing for interviews as well. I think that in terms of interview structure, there's the STAR interview technique for competency and example-based questions, which really lets you think about your experience, but making sure that you're highlighting all of the actions that you took and making sure that you always follow up with the end result that ensued from that. So there are sort of certain ways that you can structure an answer around making sure that you're including all of the right information, and just making sure that you're highlighting your accomplishments and the skills that you develop to the best of your ability, essentially. I'd say if for example, if you're in an interview and you've given your response and the interviewers are asking you quite a number of sort of follow-up questions, then it may be the case that you haven't given enough information. At the same time, maybe they have to stop you to say, oh, we're running out of time, we have to move to the next section, and that might be an indication that potentially you're potentially giving too much information and maybe speaking that little bit too much. So I think it's another kind of example in terms of practice really does help with interviews. The more you do them, the better a sense you will get in terms of doing a good job, and really sort of think about the reason behind every question. They'll be either wanting you to demonstrate a skill that's relevant to the role, or it might be an area of knowledge or sort of something that you've pre-prepared in terms of research. So really kind of think in advance in terms of the questions that might come up, and think about your previous experience and the skills you've developed would be transferable to law.
Yeah, that's great answer. And I think lots of good advice in there as well. Either Ali or Jade, do you have anything to add to that at all? No worries if not.
I would just say don't try and script an answer. Just try and cover maybe 3 points in your head, and don't just dive into it. Just take a deep breath. Well, not a deep breath, but just compose yourself in your mind before you start speaking.
Yeah, and I would just echo what's already been said. I don't have too much to add to this one. Just that I do think it's important that you do strike that balance and still bring your personality through in your answer, which, if you're doing everything that's already been said, will naturally happen for you.
Okay. There's a few kind of more practical questions coming through. So I'll start with Megan, who asks, if an applicant is on a study year abroad during the interview process, if they're being carried out in person, will there be an opportunity for them to take part in interviews in assessment centres from abroad? Or I guess the question is, will they have to travel there for the interview?
So for us, as they will be in person, you will need to attend the interview in person. If you've applied while you're on your study year and then you realise you won't be able to attend the dates because they are quite specific dates, there's no issue from our perspective for holding your application at that stage and inviting you back to an assessment centre the following year. And it might be that in terms of start dates, we can work that so you don't end up having to almost start your career a year after. But yeah, as they're in person, we'll need the people to attend them in person.
I think it would depend upon the particular firm's policies. For example, if they were holding just in-person assessment days, by which, as Jade said, you need to be there in person if everyone else is there in person. Given the last 2 years and what's happened, I would think that quite a lot of firms would be taking more of a hybrid approach, and maybe running some in person, but then at the same time offering some virtually as well. And so it would just depend upon your specific circumstance in terms of if you could travel. For example, if you were in the country and that firm that you were applying to happened to have an office there, then great, you might be able to do it from there. So it would be a bit of maybe a bit of luck there, but then also just work with the firm, and firms will give as much flexibility as they can ultimately.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, one thing I will say to the person that asked about that is I had my assessment centre while I was also on my study abroad period, and I came back for the interview, and actually I almost used that to my advantage in kind of showing commitment to the firm, because I'd literally flown over just for the day and I flew back out the same night, and I think they kind of almost liked that, and it was sort of a kind of jokey conversational point as part of the interview. So it's not a disadvantage. So don't be worried about it. But also just do check the firm's expense policy as well, because that is obviously a factor. I was lucky enough to have it covered. Had it not been covered, that's a kind of a question mark that I would have had about whether I would have attended. But yeah, just something to look out for. So there are a couple more practical questions. One person would like to know if the recruitment team goes through all the applications, or if there's an automated way of assessing them, and if so, what does the algorithm base it off?
We review all of our applications. We don't have a machine or an algorithm that does it for us. I'd be curious to know if other firms do that, how that algorithm works. But no, we don't. We kind of review all of ours.
Yeah, we review all of ours as well. I know from other events I've been to, some of the larger firms might have an automatic filter if you've got a 2-2 or something like that. But for the vast majority of firms, it's the same as what me and Nicola have said, which is that we do review all of them, especially as we know that you've taken the time to answer them. Yeah, we like to think that we'd give you the time back to review them properly.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you very much. And then also there's a question about right to work, about whether that's a factor. So this person's on a tier 2 visa. Does that impact their application at all?
It will vary firm to firm, so I think it's important before you apply that you've got the answer from the firm in terms of whether you would be eligible, because obviously it's a lot of time that goes towards these applications. For us at RPC specifically, you would need the right to work for the summer scheme, so that 2-week period. If we were to make you an offer of a training contract and you needed a work permit or visa, we would provide that for you for the duration of the training contract.
Yeah, it's similar with us. I think it does vary from firm to firm. I think that some of the larger firms probably offer more than we do in that space, but we're not going to miss out on the right candidate for those kinds of reasons.
That's great. I'm sure lots of people will be very reassured to hear that. So we have a specific question for RWK. So Jade, what is it that you're looking out for in the timed video interview?
Good question. So there's about 5 of them. They're 30 seconds each. We're looking for someone that can stick to the timings. So I've definitely watched lots of videos where it feels like they're cut off mid-flow. It doesn't matter if you still had 1 or 2 words left to say, but you can tell sometimes that someone's only just getting started with their answer. So being aware of how long that is and trying to cram as much information into that as possible. I would say, as we've all done here, a relatively clear background and looking relatively smart just in terms of showing commitment and effort for that video interview as well, and really focusing on the questions that are asked. So I think I've noticed it myself. I've done this on this. You go on a bit of a tangent and you talk about what you wish you were asked rather than the actual question. And I can forgive myself for that on a panel where I'm trying to sell RWK, but actually in the video interview, you do need to focus on exactly what's being asked and focus on it to the best of your ability. So I would say making sure that it links back to the question is quite crucial. Oh, and the only other thing I'll say is don't worry too much if you've repeated something that's already in your application form. So I know when I've spoken to people one-on-one, they've said, oh, I didn't want to bring that up because I'd already mentioned it. I would almost treat each process as separate processes. It's okay to talk about the same thing more than once. And I'd probably follow that through for the assessment centre as well. If there's something in your application that was amazing, it's okay to re-talk about that same example in the interview or the group, well, it won't be relevant in the group exercise, but in another part of the assessment process.
That's brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Jade. Nicola, shall I hand over to you?
Absolutely, I completely echo what Jade said. We actually hold a blind recruitment process, and so that means that it really doesn't matter if you just use the examples that you put on your application form, because that's going to be the first that the people that are the interviewers will be hearing about it. For fairness and consistency purposes, it means that everyone you meet on the assessment day for RPC will know your name, and that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's quite useful insight, actually. So I'm sure that will help students approach each stage. Ali, let's bring you back in. Can I ask, did you do the vacation scheme at RPC before being offered the training contract?
Yeah, I did the vacation scheme.
All right, that is perfect, because one person would like to know how to convert a VAC scheme into a training contract. So can you give us an insight into what you think worked well for you? Did you do anything in particular that you think made you come across well? Was it sort of the way you conversed with people? Did you organise coffee dates? Like anything like that you feel helped you convert that offer?
I would just say I know it's a really short period, only 2 weeks, but try and immerse yourself in the firm. So that would be, talking to as many people as you can. Arranging a coffee. There's no need to overdo it, but just to show your enthusiasm and to show genuine interest in the team that you're with and the wider firm as a whole. And just to explore all the different areas and just to show enthusiasm, genuine enthusiasm, and that people can sense that, and so they can tell. and it plays to your advantage, definitely. Yeah.
Remember, it is a two-way process. You know, I think it's so important that you end up somewhere that you're going to enjoy. You're going to be there for a minimum of 2 years, hopefully a lot longer. I'm sure the majority of firms don't want people training with them and then leaving. And so it's really important that I would say that it's somewhere that you can see yourself long term, and that it's you that's going to be working on these cases, on these matters, and with these people day in, day out. So just really make sure that it's the right firm for you as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually very important, and I think you kind of forget that when you're in the midst of the application process. So I'm sure that's a really, really good reminder for everyone who is applying that, yes, it is a two-way process. Jade, have you got anything else to add to this before we move on?
I would just say that because we don't have assessment centres for our vacation scheme, during your vacation scheme, you'll have an interview. So in terms of how to translate it across into a training contract, you'll have an interview during either during that week or preceding that week, to help you go straight from vacation scheme to training contract offer, obviously for the right candidates. Because we are a slightly smaller firm, we actually only offer 4 spaces on our vacation scheme. So in theory, it's worth pointing out that our vacation scheme is more competitive than our training contract assessment days. So if you have been unsuccessful on our vacation scheme, it's not to say that you would be unsuccessful on your training contract. It's just that because of our firm and our size, that's the way around that we do it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Right, we need to start drawing this to a close. There's one question specifically for RPC, so I feel it's fair that you've had one direct question each. So for Nicola and, in fact, Ali too, what is the difference between applying to the London office and the other regional offices?
So we have 2 offices in the UK. There's the London office and there's the Bristol office. There's quite a big differences in terms of the applications, because we only currently host summer schemes or vacation schemes in our London office. So if you're applying for our Bristol training contract, then you would apply directly for that. And we're actually deadline is approaching on the 13th of March for our Bristol training contract, whereas you have a little bit longer to apply for the London scheme, which the application deadline is in June. I think another big difference to be aware of is that our Bristol training contract is insurance focused. So there you complete 4 seats of all in insurance, and there may be international and client to common opportunities, during that time as well, similarly to the London office. But the London office, there's both insurance and commercial seats, so there's a little bit more broader variety there.
Okay, so lots of different offerings between the 2 firms. So I mean, it's great just to talk about kind of all the different types of training contracts out there, because of course they're not the same wherever you go. So it's great that we can have these different perspectives on it as well. I think we will probably have to leave it there for the webinar today, but thank you very much to Jade, Nicola and Ali for joining us. I hope everyone has enjoyed this webinar. We are hosting part 3, which is about kind of postgraduate opportunities and talking about LPC and now the SQE, as well as legal apprenticeships. But this has been a really, really good session. I have personally really enjoyed talking to the panelists today. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do have any follow-up questions, then of course, please do get in contact with our panelists or with Target Jobs, and we'll do our best to help you out where possible. But yeah, it's been really great having you all today, and thank you very much. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Take care now. Bye.
Lovely, thank you.